Hey everyone, Steve and Jonathan here, and we're going to touch upon the topic of the nightly news. I wish it were just the nightly news. We're really talking about the 24-hour news cycle that takes exactly the amount of time off as the demons. In a healthy society, the news media reports the news. The estate is designed to keep people informed about current affairs. In our current society, the mass media has become an informal branch of the government and an increasingly malevolent one. The news no longer informs the public. It is designed to manipulate it. The mass media has become the tail that wags the dog of the population. We need do little more than to notice that most of what is reported is not true. Think of the incessant race baiting that runs false narratives 24/7 to the point that violence ensues. And don't miss how when the true narrative is exposed months later, the media is as quiet as church mice. Also, notice the extensive coverage of aberrant identity politics that participated in unprecedented numbers of young souls identifying themselves in impossible ways, and then paving the way for irreparable harm to be done by pharmaceuticals and irrevocable surgeries. And finally, think of the mass media's role as the advertising arm and promoters of Big Pharma at a cost of human lives too great to bear. And not a word of truth from the media outlets to this day on that. In fact, quite the opposite, an endless promotion of cures that do more harm than the disease. We might wonder how this has happened, and the causes are complex. A sober analysis of this reality would reveal that our mass media is an operation in brainwashing and gaslighting. More on this later. The precursor for brainwashing and gaslighting to work is to dumb us down into becoming consumers of media. It begins in the classroom within the materialist worldview that reduces man to a mere evolved animal and reduces his material functions to either consuming or producing. In conjunction with the twin roles of consuming and producing is the falsehood that man's most profound attributes are his emotions. The materialist worldview rejects that there is an objective truth and an objective moral standard, which in turn rejects man's intellect and free will. Our educational system and our mass media treat us as trousered apes to be manipulated by environmental determinism, and to a devastating degree, this works. This means, first, that we are to assume the false framework that we are evolved apes, and that there is no objective truth or objective moral standard. If we hold these assumptions, we are the perfect target for the mass media. So how do we begin to remediate this fiasco? Well, I'm glad you asked. First of all, let's recognize that the mass media is in the business of brainwashing and gaslighting. That will require us to truly come to learn, to know, and understand what these techniques are. Second, we must come to recognize that we've been conditioned to consume media, just as we've been taught to consume books and all manner of other media. We must then realize that we were not made to consume such things. We were made to contemplate and consider these external media before we even allow them into our interior lives. So we must stop consuming and reacquire what it means to think, read, and consider. And finally, third, we must make a concerted effort to recognize that the mass media, as a direct artifact of brainwashing efforts, needs to get an emotional response from us. The telltale sign that we are being manipulated by the mass media is our emotional response to its reporting. The exterior recognition that this is their aim, and the interior recognition that we are in fact responding emotionally to this ploy, reveals the anatomy of this present confusion. The anatomy is a cycle of consuming brainwashing materials, getting emotionally charged, which increases the appetite to consume more brainwashing material, and before we know it, we have automatons glued to their phones incessantly consuming the very media that manipulates us. If we desire to recover sanity, all of this requires that we shine a light on our unexamined assumptions. We must come to discover and admit of objective truth and the objective moral standard as we come to realize that we were made for intellectual and moral perfection, not for this manipulation. Soon after this rediscovery, we will finally see clearly that the mass media is a massive psyop, manipulating the public as a puppet master pulls the strings on his puppet. This is the thing for which we must never stand. The mass media has given us every reason to distrust it and abandon all confidence in its ability to inform us. We ought to let Henry David Thoreau give us one final piece of advice. He said, "Read not the times, read the eternities. Knowledge does not come to us by details, but in flashes of light from heaven." In other words, we have to turn off the news and start a conversation with great and enduring authors by learning to read great books. There's no time like the present to begin.